All right, guys, let's talk about stereotypes. So I drafted my own little model here, and there's a lot going on. I'm gonna step out the way so you can really see it just for a second. You probably can't read anything because of light, but I'll go ahead and tell you kind of what we're looking at. We have community, ignorance, and bigotry. This is what I believe based on my research, from my annotated bibliography, and from experiences being on social media throughout my childhood and at a very early age. This is the pipeline that most stereotypes follow. So they start out as something that's more so community-based. It's based on community building. It's not necessarily supposed to be harmful, but it's also not necessarily friendly, you know? From this, you go to ignorance. Now, I believe that ignorance comes in here because some people, when they talk about stereotypes, where they make a stereotypical claim, they're not really quite sure of what they're saying or the harmful implications that it can have and the ways that it can hurt and offend the people around them. But this is where people who are ignorant either make the conscious decision to go back to community-based and they choose to let go of that stereotype, adjust their beliefs, adjust the things they say about people, or they choose to step on into the ignorance territory, the bigotry territory, where they know what they're saying is harmful, they know that it's 99.9% of the time incorrect, but they still choose to follow it anyway. Most of the time, bigoted stereotypes are racial stereotypes, homophobic stereotypes, misogynistic stereotypes, and anything that is just flat out distasteful and made to kind of discriminate and talk down on a community as a whole. Now, of course, the social media part is big here. If you can take a look here, if you can even see it, this right here, from community all the way to bigotry, is where algorithms come in, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's talk about social media first. Social media, in my opinion, is the primary driver behind all stereotypes. Not necessarily all stereotypes, but it's kind of the thing that gives them their place, that gives them their spotlight, you know? I'm sure from your own research, you've already conduced and, concluded, and you've already, realized from your own experiences that you can get on social media and say just about whatever you want. If you're really not that scared of digital footprint, you're really not trying to get a good job when you're older, you can get on the internet and say whatever you want about any group of people. These can be, most of the time, they're stereotypes, or I guess not most of the time they're stereotypes, but a lot of the times when people get on the internet and they want to do some bigoted shit, they're stereotyping people, they're talking down on a group of people, they're discriminating against a group of people. Now, if you haven't noticed though, community and ignorance, I think, are primarily connected by social media. Social media, of course, is behind almost all bigoted behavior, but I think that algorithms more have to do with bigoted behavior and community. But social media, like I said, you can get on the internet and you can say whatever you want, but that opens up the window for change. People will call you out. People will be like, hey, this is an inaccurate statement about a very specific group of people. You can't say this about, all gay people. You can't say this about all black people. You can't say this about all white people. You just don't say those types of things. This is community right here. This is community building. This is giving people grace to apologize for their actions depending on what it is and come back from that and change their beliefs. Now, if they choose not to change their beliefs and they choose to cross the bridge between ignorance and bigotry, well, down here, that's where biases come in. At this point, it's not really about the stereotype. It's just because you're a piece of, you're not a kind human being. And that's where algorithms come into play. Because if you haven't noticed, the content you like on social media, it's just going to keep getting put back into your face. So if you talk down on one specific group of people, all of the stuff on your feed is just going to be reaffirming that stereotype. And one thing that really, really, really gets me, I think is so funny, is, and I forgot it, so hold on. The book, The Filter Bubble, is a very, very, very nice book that talks about algorithms, and was what I was just referencing on the board about how algorithms will feed you the content that it thinks that you want to see. So for whatever reason, if you were to interact with a racist tweet on Twitter, you're likely to get another one or two racist tweets, and the algorithm will keep feeding you that content to see if that's what you agree with and to see if that's what you continue to want on your social media. And this goes back into stereotypes because it'll feed you content that is based on very well-known stereotypes, like, for example, teenagers are irresponsible, stuff like that. So now that we've kind of cleared up algorithms, let's talk a little bit lastly about identity saliency and then, of course, exposure. So identity saliency is another really, really big key defining factor in stereotypes because it's kind of the belief or the model that when people get on the internet, they will pick one defining characteristic about themselves and let that go into the forefront of their online experience. So for me, for example, my demographics would be, man, black, white, interracial, gay. I would maybe pick one of those identities to put at the forefront of everything else, and my online experience might be personalized to feed me content that my algorithms believe that I would want to see based off of that. Or more so, I will find communities that exist on the internet that are also interracial people, that are also gay people, stuff like that. So, and that also is heavily on community, But the problem with this is that's where the bigots come in, because the bigots will then go into these communities and they will form stereotypes about you. And then those stereotypes exist on social media and then are fed back to the bigots through algorithms, But then, of course, exposure comes in, because I feel like I truly, silver lining throughout all of this, my Sheldon circle, is that stereotypes are based on a lack of experience. Three things. I think a lack of experience, blatant ignorance, and then, of course, just maybe actually not three things. I don't know. Let's just say lack of experience. Forget everything I just said. Lack of experience. Stereotypes are based on the fact that you haven't had enough quality time with a specific group of people. So maybe if you're the type of person who wants mental shortcuts, you might just presume things about other people. That's what I think stereotypes are sometimes based off of. But this is where exposure comes in, because you can interact with that group of people and realize, oh, what my preconceived bias is actually completely wrong. See, all it takes is little exposure. So yeah. I also just want to film one more video because I kind of missed one of the prongs of my thesis, which is kind of important to it overall. Well, first of all, I just want to say, sorry that you had to listen to about 5 minutes of smoke alarms going off. That was really unpleasant to go back and listen to on my end, like putting all the videos together. So yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, as I was saying, on the internet, there are times where if you don't necessarily look the part for like a certain specific like niche, like let's say for example, like a music fandom. Like for example, I'm a pretty big fan of Type O Negative, which is a metal band of like the 90s. Let's say that I don't have the typical like metal look. Some would say I do, some say I don't. I really don't think I do based on what I've seen on the internet. Some people might say that I'm not like a true fan of Type O Negative, or that like I don't look like a Type O Negative fan, and like they're like, oh, there's no way you listen to that music actually just because I don't look the part. And that right there is reinforcing a stereotype that exists on social media.